Hey there, I'm FakeFox, and this is my updated Templar healing build for 4-player content in the Ascending Tide patch. At this point, this build really is a staple of this channel, and it is still my go-to for hard dungeon content, from trifecta achievements to farming motives. With Deadlands, so little change that I didn't even make a video, but this time we have some significant changes again. But for those of you who are new to this video series, what even is this build? Well, it is an off-healing build, a hybrid between traditional healer and damage dealer, providing strong healing and support, but also doing significant damage. If you are new to this playstyle, I recommend watching the entire video first and then deciding if you want to give it a try or not. This build is primarily designed for experienced healers, but as far as off-healing builds go, I would say it's a more accessible one. So let's start out with the race. Despite the scaling hybridization, I still think Breton is our best choice. We will be working a lot with Combat Prayer, which is ridiculously expensive now. Altmer, Dunmer and Khajiit do have higher damage potential, but they are pretty difficult to work in terms of sustain. For the Mundus stone, Thief remains the best choice for everything damage related, but of course it also increases our healing. For the attribute points, I personally have no issue with 46 in Magicka, despite using Witch Mother's Potent Brew as my buff food, but you can also go with about 10 or so points in health if you want to be a bit safer. It will lose you a small amount of damage though. For the potions, the ideal choice is Essence of Spell Power, but Looted Essence of Magicka is totally fine for easier content. Moving on to the gear now. The two main sets haven't changed. Spellpower Cure and Master Architect remain the best offensive support in 4-player content. Spellpower Cure provides a very strong permanent damage buff with Major Courage. All we need to do is keep up healing. Master Architect on the other hand is activated with our ultimate for a burst damage window, and 4-player content is all about that burst damage. Master Architect is only on our healing staff, so we additionally use a mythic or monster set and an ability altering weapon. For the mythic or monster set, Magma Incarnate is a really good support choice, but only if the tank is not providing minor courage. So I would only recommend it in coordinated groups. The strongest damage choice is Harpooner's Warding Kilt, but that is also situational, as we need to be able to keep up the stacks. Good alternatives are Death Dealer's Feat, as well as essentially any good DPS monster set. 2 individual pieces with critical chance also work well and is the least situational option. The ability altering weapons is where it gets really interesting this patch. We have 3 choices here: Maelstrom Lightning Staff, Maelstrom Greatsword, and Black Rose Daggers. The staff is the weakest option in terms of damage and makes Magicka sustain more difficult, but provides generally good utility. The Greatsword, on the other hand, can achieve the highest DPS, but makes stamina sustain difficult, and is also quite restrictive. Daggers are, in my opinion, the best option with really good sustain and utility, and while the damage potential is lower than the Greatsword, they actually often perform better for me in the real encounters. But all 3 options are absolutely viable, and the differences are pretty small. There are also a few alternative 5-piece sets. I would not recommend them over Spellpower Cure or Master Architect, but they are good options if you're missing those sets. For Spellpower Cure, the replacement is Olorim, and for Master Architect, either Roaring Opportunist or Succeed Champion work pretty well. The best armor types are currently situational. Medium armor does provide more damage than light armor, but for that to work, both sustain and penetration must be good enough. Personally, I play with 2 medium and 5 light at the moment. As traits and enchantments, we want Divine's Magicka on all armor pieces, and ideally infused spell damage on the jewelry. Arcane is also fine if that's what you have. The differences are extremely small here. For the weapons, if you use daggers, you want Nirnhold and Charged with Shock and Flame Enchant. That unique combination is a really nice thing about playing dual wield, as it is beneficial for both damage and support. For both Destruction Staff and Greatsword, I recommend Precise Shock. Up next are the champion points. The best choice for the slotted blue nodes is Fighting Finesse, Backstabber, Biting Aura, and Master at Arms. Thaumaturge and Weapon Expert can also be interesting when you either can't flank or have too much critical damage, or if you need to heal too much so you can't keep up a good rotation. For the slotted red nodes, I recommend Boundless Vitality, Fortified, Celerity, and Siphoning spells. For certain encounters, you can also take Expert Evasion or Slippery for extra safety, especially if you use a stamina-based weapon. And Spirit Mastery in combination with Templar's passives can be pretty nice if your teammates spend most of their time on the floor. So let's now look at the skills and bar layouts. Our main spammable is Puncturing Sweeps, which works in both single target and AoE, and also has a really strong self-heal. It also procs the Burning Light passive, dealing even more damage. In single target encounters, we replace it with Radiant Oppression when the target is under 25% health. For the rest of our damage, we are using 4 dots. These partially depend on our weapon. With Dual Wield, we use Deadly Cloak, with Staff, Unstable Wall, and with a two-hander, Stampede, and Carve. The other dots are Solar Barrage, Blazing Spear, and except for the two-hander, Mystic Orb. Dropping Orb can generally be a damage gain, not just for the two-hander, but we can only do that if another player is using Orb anyway, as the synergy is more important than that additional damage. And then we also use Rearming Trap for the critical damage buff and the fighter skill passives. For our healing, we are using 2 skills, Combat Prayer as our burst heal, because it also buffs Minor Berserk, and then a Hot to keep up constant healing and Major Courage. For that, we can use Radiating Regeneration, Illustrious Healing, or Echoing Vigor based on essentially personal preference. And the last skill is Siphon Spirit for Magicka and Lifesteal. As ultimates, we have Dawnbringer on our front bar for the passives. The ultimate we then actually use has to be on our back bar because of Master Architect. If the tank is a Necromancer using Colossus, we should be using Aggressive Horn. Otherwise, we can use Meteor. If necessary, Barrier is also a good option. As passives, we of course need our 3 class lines. Keep in mind that you need an Adric Spear ability on each bar, and you need to actively use 1 Dawn's Wrath skill for the passives. Then we need the 2 weapons we use, so Healing Staff and either Destruction Staff, Dual Wield, or Two-Handed, Light and Medium Armor, Mages and Fighter Skilled, Undaunted, Racial Passives, and Medicinal use from Alchemy. Moving on to the rotation. With both Dual Wield and the Destruction Staff, we can play a largely static rotation, recasting our dots and healing every 10 seconds, and filling the remaining time with Puncturing Sweeps, Radiant Oppression, and dynamically recasting our 2 longer-lasting skills. For the two-hander, it is a bit more complicated, as we should make use of the longer duration of Stampede, as well as the stacking mechanic of Carve that also increases the duration, in order to sustain with 2 stamina skills. If higher incoming damage forces us out of this rotation, we use Combat Prayer to dynamically react to incoming damage, while still recasting our 10-second skills all at once, so the timings don't get messed up completely. Whenever there is some sort of break, like an immunity phase or position change, we can use that to reset our rotation, heal everyone up, and refill our resources if necessary. For an effective rotation, we of course want to be weaving. That means doing a light attack with every skill. With Puncturing Sweeps and Radiant Oppression, we have 2 channeled abilities that are more difficult to correctly weave. Messing up the timing here can be a significant damage loss. Despite being a channeled skill, Puncturing Sweeps can actually be weaved as fast as instant skills, but that takes some practice, as the timing feels very strange. It looks like the light attack isn't even coming out, as the ability is still channeling, but the light attack animation then happens with the next skill. Radiant Oppression can also be problematic because it has a unique timing, and messing it up can cause you to get stuck in a heavy attack. If you really want to get the maximum performance out of your build, I recommend doing some dummy practice, because in actual fights you just have other things to pay attention to. So what are your actual priorities? What is the key to successfully healing? Well, you don't actually need a lot of healing to keep a group alive. That's why off-healing builds work after all. All you actually need is fast reactions. And there are two factors that do enable fast reactions. The first one is obviously paying attention. You need to be aware of what's going on around you, what your teammates are doing, and what mechanics are coming up. And secondly, you need to be prepared. That means keeping up your rotation and resources so you can use one or even multiple combat players without getting into trouble. And it also means being in a position where you can instantly heal without having to waste time running around first, searching for your group members. Stay close to the target and keep your group in sight. Don't get separated from your group by mechanics. What I like to do is stick with the tank, because that's where both damage and healing are usually required, and it's also a good reference point for the damage dealers. If people then just run away from the group, it's their fault if they die. Chasing people around usually isn't a good idea. It just splits the group up even more and piles up problems. A dead damage dealer usually isn't such a huge deal if the rest of the group remains functional, and simply can be revived later. And with that, we are at the end of this video. As always, I have a written build summary and other useful stuff in the video description. If you have any further questions, just ask them in the comments. I hope you will have fun with my build, and thanks for watching. See you.